You are listening to Leading the Factory Forward with your host, Lynn Friest. We share interviews with manufacturing experts and strategies for embracing the digital future, recruiting a new workforce, finding new business. Lynn is an advanced manufacturing strategist and leadership consultant who is on a mission to show manufacturing leaders how to improve their current operations while preparing for a digital future. And here's your host, Lynn Friest.
Welcome. This is the third part of our four-part series on lessons from the Lean Startup methodology. And these are things that could be used for manufacturing leaders who are introducing new products or maybe even trying to redefine their business into new areas. And this can also be used for those of you who are working in organizations where you might just simply reframe these ideas from how to work with customers to how to work with and understand your internal customers or the people you deal with every day. So in the last episode, we introduced the value proposition. And this episode is going to be about customer discovery. Again, customer discovery is a subset of the business model generation process. It's a key element of it. In fact, customer discovery is probably the most important piece of the whole Lean Startup puzzle. A quote from the Startup Owner's Manual, the number one goal of customer discovery amounts to this: turning the founder's initial hypothesis about their market and customer into facts. And the customer discovery process searches for a problem-solution fit. Have we found a problem lots of people want us to solve, or a need they want us to fill? And does our solution solve the problem in a compelling way? The number one idea for this topic is you have to get out of the building. You have to learn about your customers. You can't do that. You can make all kinds of assumptions, but that's all you have at this point, is you have assumptions about what your product or service is going to be. You have to get out of the building and actually talk to them. So we'll be going over the customer discovery process and give you some steps through a few ideas on how to get started. Here are the things we'll explore in this episode. A book called Talking to Humans, defining your customer. Who is it you want to learn from? What do you want to learn? What is your hypothesis? What are you trying to prove? How do you find customers to interview? How do you conduct a successful interview? How do you make sense of what you learn? And finally, I'll share with you some sample customer discovery questions from an author by the name of Mike Fishbein. So to start with, we get some ideas from a book and an article called Talking to Humans by Giff Constable. It said, the art of being a great entrepreneur is finding the right balance between vision and reality. The qualitative part of customer discovery is surprisingly hard for most people, partly because talking to strangers can feel intimidating, and partially because our instincts on how to do it are often wrong. So let's get started. As I said, you have to get out of your building and talk to people. Well, in the Lean Startup process, we would say you need to talk to about 100 people, and probably more depending on the complexity of your product. And if you stop early, you just don't get the magic. What we found from people that have gone through the process is you start to really get the magic at about 60 people, and then really start to get rich information as you get to that 100 number. I had a friend who I helped go through the customer discovery process. He was somebody who made custom jewelry. But what he found as he talked to more and more people was that people like to buy stock jewelry at a lower price several times during the year, but then once a year or so, they'd want to find a piece of custom jewelry. So he found that the way to get to his customers was by offering them something at a lower cost point where they'd make a couple of purchases and then they'd be ready to buy his more expensive stuff. So you think about, who do you want to learn from? Obviously, potential customers. Think about who that customer is, and you're going to have to decide where to find them. You'll also think about who are the customers that might be early adopters of your idea. Obviously, there's that early adopter curve that's probably 20% or so of the people. You also don't want to go on the people who are the laggers, who are the harder to convince. But then the other piece is, think about who are your partners, possibly in either distribution or manufacturing or people you get materials from. Who are the people? And start asking them. Ask them almost the same questions to see if it rings true for them as far as what your hypothesis for your product or service is. So getting into that, really have to be clear on what you want to learn. What's that idea that you're testing? Clayton Christensen, who was famous for the Innovator's Dilemma book and a series of books, his idea was that 85% of the time you're going to be wrong with your new product idea, and you're going to, at the very least, need to pivot, if not change your idea dramatically. So with all of this, your goal in looking for customers is to gain insight. And as we mentioned earlier in the value proposition, you have to get insight into their pains and their gains. So where do you find people to interview? Well, the obvious one is, where do your customers hang out? Where are they at already? Obviously, if you're in business, you have existing customers. Maybe test these ideas out and ask them, do they want to purchase a new product that you're offering? So existing customers are a place to start. Then you think of trade shows. Go and see what's going on at a trade show. If people are looking at a booth that's similar to what you're thinking of offering, ask people who are at the show. There may be some local meetings, whether it be chambers of commerce or other things where you can run into people that you might be able to identify. And then finally, obviously, there are industry groups. So finding a way to connect with those groups, being connected with people in those groups, that may be another source of where you can find customers. Then how do you conduct a great interview? Well, it's not haphazard. You have to go at it in a very structured way. You really prepare an actual interview guide. What are the questions? What's the order? Now, at the end of this episode, we'll talk about a few examples of that, but you need to be prepared to actually conduct the interview. And at the same time, this is an interview not just for qualitative information, but also for some quantitative information. But more importantly, you just need to be able to take a lot of notes because obviously with talking to 100 customers, you're not going to remember everything that got said. And if you have the opportunity, you might try to go in a pair so that one person can ask questions and be fully involved in listening and interacting with the customer, and one can actually transcribe or write the information down. So now you've conducted 100 interviews. How are you going to make sense of all that? Again, this is the idea is that while we're gathering qualitative information, we're also looking for patterns. What are the patterns? Did we hear people say the same thing multiple times? Most importantly, are they not confirming our idea? Is what they're looking for, the solutions they need, the problems they have to solve, are they not a fit for what we thought they were and what our potential product was? Do we have to pivot? And then the other thing is, even though this may be somewhat qualitative data, you can actually create a category chart, some things that in your questions, there weren't yes, no answers, but you can start again, capturing those patterns that are in there and start thinking about, maybe you ask each customer about the size of a potential product. Maybe you ask each customer about how often they used a product. Maybe you ask each customer about, is it a use case A or a use case B, something like that. So again, you can collect some actual data in a chart form to help you make sense of it all. So then the last piece here is, again, from a blog post by Mike Fishbein. He has an excellent resource on some questions for customer discovery. Again, as we mentioned, there's different elements of customer discovery. So to validate your hypothesis about a problem or to learn more about a problem, you could ask some questions like, what's the hardest part of your day? What are some unmet needs you have? What product do you wish you had, but it doesn't exist right now? And those are some really broad opening type statements. And then if it's a little more focused, in other words, you're actually trying to validate what the problem is, you can ask them again. It's really, you're asking about the customer and their experience, not about your product. What do you find it hard to do? How important is this activity that you'll get from my product? What's the value you'll be getting from it? And then tell me about the last time you did this and listen for things like, what were the complaints? What didn't work well? Those kinds of things. Then if you're more in the mode of product discovery, again, you've gotten a little more clarity in that. What do you think should be done to help you with that problem? What would your ideal solution to this problem look like? If you could wave a magic wand and instantly have any imaginable solution to this problem, what would it look like? So again, you've kind of gone down the cascade of stuff here and started from just what are the customers' pains, gains, getting a little more granular, and then you finally say, what are some of the key elements? Then you can start thinking about, is my product really going to deliver those things? And then the end of the interview is not just it's a wrap up, but on the other hand, it can be almost the most important part of the interview. This is where you ask things like, is there anything else you think I should know about that I didn't ask? And maybe the most important question, do you know anyone else who might also have this problem that I could ask a similar question to? And then in maintaining your connection with these people you've interviewed, can I keep you in the loop as the product develops? Or can I follow up with you if I have some more questions at a later time? So again, having a great close to an interview, I think, is also very useful. So to wrap things up, here are the steps we covered in this episode. We talked a little about the book, Talking to Humans. Talked about defining your customer. Who is it you need to learn from with respect to your new product or service? What do you want to learn? What is your hypothesis? What is the elements of your product that you need to know that have a fit out there? How do you find customers to interview? How do you conduct a successful interview? How do you make sense out of these 100 interviews that you have done? And then finally, gave you some example of sample customer discovery questions from Mike Fishbang. So again, the resources for this show that I mentioned earlier are listed in the show notes and on my website, and be sure to check those out. And I guess I challenge you to take a look at the article, Talking to Humans. Again, this is an element where we always are in love with our idea, but we need to talk to somebody who actually wants to buy our idea. So, and Talking to Humans is a wonderful resource to get that to you. So try out a couple of these ideas, talk to some humans during the next week, and leave me a note in the website comments. Next up, we're going to be exploring and understanding how to describe your offer and connect it to your customer's story. How do you quickly and easily describe what your value is towards solving the customer's problem? We'll be reviewing the book by Donald Miller titled Building a Story Brand. And his key idea is, if you confuse, you lose. And that basically means is if your marketing is all about you, the customer won't know what to buy or when to buy or how it solves his problem, you probably won't be connecting with them. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.